What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Three and Out YouTube page. I'm John Middlekauff, and we are talking football all day, every day. Make sure you subscribe, like the video, share it with your friends. Let's roll, baby. What is going on? Happy Tuesday. Hopefully everyone's having a good week. Here to talk a little football. The Jets made some headlines on Monday regarding a player who they traded for, who wants to be traded again, who they refuse to trade. We will dive into that chaotic situation. Trey Lance, Jerry Jones, and the Dallas Cowboys, I think we have to just acknowledge the reality of the situation where we're sitting here after the first preseason game. I heard Sean McVay. Now, he'd mentioned this during the offseason, but I was listening to his podcast when he was on with Big Cat and PMT or PFT on PMT. And he said something that really jumped out to me, and I got to give him credit because I saw a pretty glaring stat that actually isn't that shocking. And I think all head coaches who are play callers should double down on this maneuver. Quick thought on the top 25. I think the AP came out today, and I have a couple quick takeaways. Not necessarily where teams are ranked, but just pressure moving forward now that we have this playoff system. And then, of course, it's Take Tuesday, and saw a lot of things flying around about Steph Curry's performance over the last two games that essentially won us the gold medal. Without his 60 points, we probably get the bronze. I mean, it's really that simple. Have a couple quick thoughts there. And obviously the mailbag will be out later today on the old YouTube at John Middlekauff. It's the Instagram. Fire in those DMs. But before we dive into a little football talk, great time of year. I mean, I went on with Colin yesterday. We have a video out on all the rookie quarterbacks, the guys drafted in the top 12. I think 6 guys drafted in the top 12. Watched all their performances, all their throws, some instant reaction to their game. So we're starting to get some substance, some tangible, no more hypotheticals. Still some hypotheticals out there because Brandon Ayuk situation, but like it's real football. Definitely the regular season is not that far away. We're under a month, so let's buckle up. But like I said, before we talk some Jets, I got to tell you about my friends, my partners, and the official ticketing app of this podcast. And listen, like I said, football season is coming. I mean, you can see the light at the end of the tunnel. It felt a couple months ago a long, long way away. It does not feel long at all. Some of these teams have been in camp for 3.5, 4 weeks. We've already got a preseason game. We got more preseason games this Thursday. It'll be here before you know it. And if you want to go to one of these games, I said on a recent podcast, like, I think I'm going to go to Texas, Oklahoma because of my friends at Game Time. Someone hit me up in the DMs like, that's not a real SEC game. Well, partly because I got to fly into a real airport because I got to be back Sunday morning to work. And Dallas just makes a lot of sense. And actually, it is a real SEC game because Texas and Oklahoma are now in it. It's one of the great rivalries in college football. And if you want to attend one of those events, obviously concerts, like I said, I knew a bunch of people last week in Vegas to see Morgan Wallen. Brady and Mike Tyson rolled out with them. If you want to go to any concert this fall, I highly recommend it. Nothing like a good concert to just kind of relax, have a few pops, enjoy yourself. Use Game Time because take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code JOHN for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code JOHN for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. It is really hard to be successful in any walk of life, in any industry, as just a human being when chaos is all around you. I had no business to not somehow wind up successful. I had two parents. They both had jobs. My dad was on my ass 24/7, 365 with school, not just attending school. If I ever got caught, skipping class, I got in a lot of trouble, but having good grades pushed me to go to college. I never had a dinner unless I got kicked out because I was in trouble, that there wasn't food on the table. I had no business not to quote unquote make it in life. And we've all known people, especially the older you get, that grew up in chaotic situations, whether it was parent situations, whether it was financial situations. When I went to work at Fresno State, saw some of the guys on our team, what they had to overcome to put themselves in college, the first guy in the history of their family to get a college degree. I remember Coach Hill taking such great pride in that because of what a big deal it was. Most guys were not going to go on to the NFL, but this isn't necessarily about sports. Like some people's path in life is much more difficult. And when they make it, they deserve more credit. It is much harder to make it out of chaos than it is when everything's laid out. Now, that doesn't mean you're guaranteed anything. We've known a lot of people with easy access to stuff who have failed, but I give you a lot more credit when you overcome dysfunction to be successful. That's for business, that's for life, that's for any personal situation. I have a lot of admiration for that. And obviously, working in football in college in the NFL, you saw a lot of that. Guys overcoming just crazy odds. Now, obviously, they were had God given athletic ability, but some of their circumstances when they were young, it's crazy how they were able to make it. And usually, you need some stability in your life, whether it be a coach, whether it be a parent, whether it be a grandparent, whether it be some other mentor to kind of help you out and lead you that way. Because most humans get distracted easily. I thought Belichick for 20 years in the peak of the Patriots' powers did a really good job of the moment they had a question mark, like we're going to Tom Brady, Drew Brees, trade him immediately. The moment a guy gets in trouble, no matter how good he is, Chandler Jones, he's gone. He's on another team. The moment there's a contract situation, we're not going to pay you, he's traded. Not because he didn't value those players, not because he didn't think he needed those guys to win, but you can't overcome distractions in a sport and an industry that is demands so much focus and attention on what's going on. And the different media markets obviously bring in more craziness. And there's no bigger media market in America than New York. So everything's under the microscope with the Giants, with the Jets, with the Knicks, with the Yankees, with the Mets. It's crazy. It really is. And it's just different depending on where you are in the country. That being said, when you have chaotic situations as a team, even if things are normal in your position room, with your coordinator on the practice field, you get asked about it constantly. And the Jets, who last year, no fault of their own, they trade for Aaron Rodgers, spirits are high, they're on hard knocks. People like me are like, they're going to win the division. Tears Achilles. And then it just came off the rails and was a complete embarrassment the rest of the season. The Zach Wilson experiment that they tried to kind of have their cake and eat it too. Instead of getting rid of him, they kept him on the team. Then by the midseason, he got benched and he didn't want to come back. And he was complaining that Rodgers was supposed to be his friend and his mentor, disappeared. And it was a joke. It was typical Jets. Crazy, dysfunctional, chaotic. That is kind of what they're used to. And usually, I don't care how much talent you have on their team or on your team and who's coaching you, you're going to lose in that situation. And they lost pretty consistently, and they weren't any good. And then this season, it's like, okay, Rodgers, 40 years old, healed. We had some pretty normal veteran, good guys, Tyron Smith, Mike Williams. We got some young ascending stars. Let's take care of business. Let's give ourselves a shot to not be that chaotic. Then they trade for Haason Reddick from the Eagles. And the reason the Eagles traded him, we've talked about this a million times, because he wanted more money. And the Eagles said, we're not going to give you more money. It was public knowledge. Then the Jets trade for him. And as of August 12th, he didn't show up to OTAs. He hasn't been there in training camp. And he officially asked for another trade. And if they were to trade him, I think it would be the first time in NFL history a guy got traded to a team, never conducted one moment with that franchise on the field, in a meeting room, did nothing, and then got traded again. Which obviously, when you see he gets requested trade, everyone laughs and mocks the Jets because you realize they're not going to trade him. The Antonio Brown situation. Let's go back 5-6 years with the Raiders. He practiced during OTAs. And I remember knowing some guys on that staff, they're like, he's our best player by a mile. He's incredible. And they were really hopeful. Then obviously after the summer, things get weird. He burns off his feet. And then it just turns into a mess. And he demands to get traded. They cut him. It was an embarrassment for the organization. But In that situation, at least he had practice and they thought they had something. They're like, God, this guy's incredible. This guy's going to help us out. I do not understand trading for a player who wants more money and then assume everything will just be worked out without being willing to give him more money. So Joe Douglas puts out a statement immediately like, we're not trading him. He has to follow the rules. He's getting fined. The CBA, blah, 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 blah. None of that means anything. And Haason Reddick is losing money by the day. I think his fines are already over $1 million. But like, how is this thing going to be solved? If you are the Jets and you are Joe Douglas and you're not willing to give him a pay raise, and I think at this point in time, we have to assume that they don't plan on paying him. So eventually, Reddick, if you take that tactic, will just show up because he's not going to miss game checks. You wouldn't think. So you're going to bring a disgruntled player that you do not know, that you've never coached, that does not know your scheme. There is no cohesion there into your locker room. When the only thing you tried to avoid after last year and the previous couple years with the quarterback disasters, the offensive coordinator just being completely over his head and everyone making fun of you, is to bring in a player with pretty high name recognition who is pissed off, who clearly isn't happy with you. I just do not understand how they didn't see this coming. I can't even fathom imagining a different outcome when you knew you were trading for this player in this situation and with these circumstances. And this is why, and I said this at the combine, when you're there in Indy and you actually see the teams and you start talking to people and you just realize the overwhelming majority of the league, there are 32 teams. You could argue 10, maybe 12 are well run and have a shot every year. And for the most part, it's the same freaking 12, 10 teams all the time. That's why the majority of the playoffs over the last even just half decade have been run by the same teams. It's why for a long time in the peak of the Brady Belichick, it were the same 3 or 4 teams. It was the Ravens. It was obviously the Patriots. It was Peyton Manning's squad. It was the Steelers. A couple other teams rotated in and out, but there were consistent teams. Now in the NFC, the Niners, the Rams, the Eagles and the Cowboys, right? Doesn't mean they don't have weird situations, but they are so much more well-run consistently. The Lions now have thrown their hat in the ring with their operation, at least based on a small sample size. And then you have the Jets, who have the record currently for team sports playoff drought. And I just don't think it's a coincidence. Throw another shrimp on the Barbie. Get on all the UFC 305 action live from the land down under at DraftKings Sportsbook, the official sports betting partner of the UFC. The middleweight title's on the line for the main event, but the card is stacked full of rip snorter blokes and shellas. And speaking of stacked, if you're new to DraftKings, listen up. New customers get $5 to get $150 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use the code JOHN. That's code JOHN for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. UFC 305. It's going to be a ripper of a good time. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. I had no issue last year, right around this time. I guess it was with a couple weeks from now. So a year and a couple weeks. When Jerry Jones traded a 4th-round pick for Trey Lance. Jerry Jones, oil man, deal maker, maverick, take some risks. And listen, personally, I admire humans in business that are willing to take risks. It is easy in life to stay in the slow lane. Usually the successful people are lapping you in the fast lane. Doesn't mean they don't get in occasional crashes, but you can't play it safe. And Jerry Jones traded a 4th-round pick for a guy who surely they had graded as a top 5 player in the draft a couple years. And they said, we got 2 things. 1, there might just be something here. And 2, best case scenario, this kind of elephant in the room of our starting quarterback, Dak Prescott, and his contract situation, maybe we just find an heir apparent. And a 4th-round pick for a team that, for 3 straight years, won 12 games. What are we talking about? Pick 120, pick 125. Who cares? I do not put that much emphasis on taking a risk at that position for a guy. Now, he makes some money, over the couple year period, I think it was like this year he's making 5.3. Last year he was making $6 or $7 million. So you had to pay him $12 million, to be a backup quarterback. But as we sit here today, here's what it turns out. He's a third string quarterback. He couldn't win the backup job in San Francisco last year. I watched all of his snaps this morning. He's not going to win the backup quarterback job in Dallas. So part of taking risks is you're not always going to win them. Sometimes you're going to lose them. It was not Trey Lance's fault that he was drafted third overall and the 49ers traded all those first round picks for him. That's on the 49ers. It's on John Lynch, Kyle Shanahan, Adam Peters, and that crew. They missed. And they got very, very lucky. Usually when you make a move like that, you are royally screwed. And Purdy fell into their laps and just kind of saved the franchise. I mean, period, point blank, end of story. So Jerry Jones saw a guy that he could get for really cheap, and best case scenario, he would strike oil. It turns out there wasn't any oil. There's nothing. And you watch this guy play. To me, he's average as the day is long, misses a lot of easy throws, does flash a little bit, but he threw 41 times and passed for 188 yards. He averaged 4.6 yards a completion. But to me, it's the touch. He just doesn't have any touch. When you watch him, you just see a guy who doesn't have much feel. It's why I'm so much more bullish on this class than his class, because of the resumes of the players, because of how many snaps of high-level football the whole crew has played in all the biggest conferences. And when you take guys from these smaller schools, and his was kind of an outlier situation because the season was canceled in 2020, so he only started one season. And obviously in the NFL, he has not played very much. But part of it is because he can't play. He's just not very good. And the gap between him and Dak Prescott it couldn't be any wider. And Cooper Rush is significantly better. So think I don't expect the Cowboys to cut this player, but he's going to be the most expensive third string quarterback in the history of the league. He makes $5.3 million. And I think when you look around, when all these rosters are set, most of these third string quarterbacks, one, are going to be on the practice squad because of the rule that you can elevate the guy on game day from the practice squad. But I'll promise you this, they won't be making that much money. And that's not his fault. That's what the third overall pick gets. He signed a $35 million contract. And this was a move, and Jerry was worth taking. All the other quarterbacks, Mac Jones, Justin Fields, and Zach Wilson either went for a 6th or 7th round pick. The difference is Jerry got him for 2 years. All those guys are on 1-year contracts with all their teams. Jerry's had now all of last season and then all this offseason up until now and through this season before his contract runs out. So it was, did he quote unquote overpay? I don't know who else was offering a 4th rounder, but I have no issue with it. But let's just call a spade a spade. Didn't work. Sean McVay. Calling timeouts, I have this, it's not even a theory. I think it's just a reality. When you're the offensive play caller, and I think this would go for defensive play callers as well, but let's just stick with offensive play callers. It is very, very difficult to also manage the game. It's why for a long period of time, when Andy Reid was in Philadelphia, he took a lot of crap as being just awful game manager. And I think if you look at it, it's not like if you just ask Andy Reid sitting on his couch or in his office or when he's watching a game, he wouldn't know when to call a timeout and when not to call a timeout. And I think that would go the same for all these offensive play callers that are currently in the NFL. It's obviously very easy for us when we're watching our squad on our couch on Sunday, gambling on a game, fantasy play, screaming at the TV like, call a timeout. What are you doing? Everyone does it. It's a great part about being a fan is you get really emotional sitting there because the game's not moving that fast. You get to watch it in real time, doing nothing else beside, drinking whatever you're drinking and eating some snacks. Well, as the play caller, you aren't just worried about the current play, but what play you're going to call next. And obviously dealing with your other coaches for half the game. And Sean McVay, this guy named John Stryker, who was Vrabel's kind of right-hand man. And over the last 4 or 5 years in Tennessee, a team that took great advantage, not just timeouts, but situational football with rules, he utilized this guy. And when Vrabel got fired, Sean McVay hired him. And McVay told the Pardon My Take guys, which is 100% true, I kind of sucked last year with timeouts. And an underrated, like, sneaky problem with McVay over the course of his career, no one can argue his resume, and no one would argue he's not a top 2 or 3 coach currently in the NFL. Dude's a star. Been a rocket ship since he arrived in LA. He blows a lot of timeouts. And I found this stat. I was YouTubing some different stuff. In 2023, the Rams called more timeouts in the third quarter than any other team by 3. They had 9 timeouts. The next team with the most timeouts was the 49ers with 6. Those 2 teams blew more timeouts in the third quarter. And obviously, you get to the fourth quarter, you either got 1 or 2, and you're at a disadvantage. When you're calling procedural timeouts, you're going to run out of the play clock, whatever. You'd be better off taking the 5-yard penalty with 7 minutes left to go in the third quarter. And I don't think it's a coincidence that Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay are awful in these situations. Why? Because their head and their eyes are buried in their play sheet, which is a huge advantage for their team. But it's also a disadvantage when it comes to just running the operation. How can you be laser focused on something as serious and as complex and as difficult as calling the offensive plays and also try to manage situations? Clearly, you're at a disadvantage. And I think this goes back to Andy Reid in Philadelphia for a long period of time. It's hard. It is not easy to do. And Sean McVay acknowledged it. Too many times last year, I was blowing timeouts, and it screwed us. Not just the playoff game, but in the regular season game. It hurt us. And he fixed it. Or he attempted to fix it in hiring us. Now, I can't speak to the 49ers, but if Kyle Shanahan doesn't have someone similar on his staff, he's at a disadvantage. Because Kyle Shanahan, like Sean McVay, is bad at timeouts, which, like we figured out, is understandable. But the best part about a coaching staff, there is no salary cap. And when your owner has money, Sean's has a ton, so does Kyle's. You can hire whoever the hell you want. So having one of these guys, to me, when you're a play calling head coach, if you're John Harbaugh, if you're Jim Harbaugh, if you're Dan Campbell, if you're Sirianni, if you can't figure it out, we really don't know what you're doing during the game. But when your head is in that sheet and you're worried about plays, schemes, players, injuries, position coaches, you got a lot going on. This guy seems like a pretty vital individual. Now, it seems like Sean McVay might have plucked the top guy in the NFL because obviously he was a free agent when Vrabel got canned. But to me, this individual or grooming this individual seems like a must-have. And if these offensive play callers are not going to listen to this guy, they're at a disadvantage every single week.
Preparing for your upcoming fantasy football draft, do you wish that you could wave a magic wand and somehow know who exactly your league mates are going to take? Well, with Draft Intel from Fantasy Pros, you'll know exactly how your league mates draft better than they do. Draft Intel will automatically analyze your league's history to see who rushes to the draft board first to take a quarterback, who takes too many rookies, and who is going to reach for their favorite team's players over and over again. Everybody hates a homer, and every league has one of them. But right now, you can put all that intel to the test by bringing those patterns directly into a mock draft and make your mock draft feel like the real thing. Check out fantasypros.com/volume today to get an edge over your league mates right now and forever.
Okay, the top 25 in the AP came out today. And, typical cast of characters: Georgia, Bama, Texas, Oregon, no particular order, Ohio State. And I had a couple big takeaways from it. Not because I put that much emphasis until we see these teams play 4 or 5 games. Georgia might be the best team. They might be the third team. Ohio State could be the 6th team. They could be the 2nd team. You get Oregon. They're all within the top 6 or 7. We'll see how they look after a month of games. I do think there is some tangible pressure, though, on certain teams to do certain things. And I think at the highest level, there's a lot of pressure on Ohio State. They have the highest, same with Oregon. Now, the difference is Ohio State and Ryan Day, they've been in the playoffs recently. He's had success. Hell, he's been in a national championship game. He's had a lot of success. But anytime you're at that school and you've been getting your ass kicked by Jim Harbaugh, Then you double down on the NIL. You land all these sweet dudes in the transfer portal. You hire your boy Chip Kelly to run the offense. I'm not saying they have to win the national championship. That's clearly very, very difficult to do. But you could argue the final four might not even be good enough for the fan base. Obviously, if you get to the national championship and lose it, that stings, that hurts, that sucks. But you get contract extensions doing that. And I think there is a ton of pressure on Ohio State to kick ass and take names. Now, when Dan Lanning, kind of similar, roster stacked, spending a ton on NIL. To me, his margin for error is a little smaller than Ohio State, or I guess larger. That like if he didn't make the national championship game, I don't think it's the end of the world. I kind of think Oregon's got to make the Final Four. All the hype. They've been really close. We talk about them like this championship level squad. Last time I checked, haven't even won the conference the last couple of years because they couldn't beat Washington. Now, obviously, DeBoer's gone, who's kind of owned Lanning. Penix is gone, so you should own that game. You play Ohio State this year, but most of the Big Ten teams you should be able to handle. I think Ohio State, if they ain't in the championship game, it's going to feel like a disaster. And to me, Oregon's got to be in the Final Four. Now, that's the best of the best. I think there are two teams when it comes to making the playoffs. I don't want to say it's make the playoffs or fired because this guy's won national championships. He's one of the most famous coaches. He has changed this program to a higher level for forever. But Dabo Swinney makes more money than every coach in college football except Kirby Smart. And he's earned it. Like he's made that program a ton. The NFL is littered with his players. He's had a boatload of success. But these last couple years haven't gone that well. And one thing with Dabo Swinney is I don't mess with the transfer portal, which kind of feels like Coach K in the early 2000s. I don't do one and dones. Feels if you want to be successful in this sport currently, you got to change your tune because it's not sustainable. You don't need to take 10 guys in the transfer portal, but because of your program and because of how many guys you put in the NFL, you should be if Ohio State, if Bama, if LSU, if Georgia, if they dabble a player here, a player there, Florida State, a team in your own conference who, if it wasn't for devastating quarterback injuries, would have been in the playoffs last year when it was only 4 teams. Why? Transfer portal. Jared Verse, first round pick, transfer portal. Keon Coleman, first round pick? Yeah, first round pick, transfer portal. Or maybe he was the first pick of the second round. But like the second round defensive tackle, who is the Rams also took, transfer portal. Like it kind of matters. It kind of matters. So there's going to be a lot of pressure on him. One, listen, you make the playoffs, even if you lose in the first round, it'll have everyone take a deep breath. You start getting paid $11, $12 million. The expectations for your program, like last year, just wasn't good enough. And I don't know. It's hard for me to feel great about them. Now, they've always recruited well. They clearly just depend only on high school kids and developing. Well, they have no problem on doing that. And I think the quarterback, who got a lot of hype, and it was easy a couple years ago to see like bench DJ for Clint, and then you watch him last year, is very hit or miss. So I think there's just a lot of pressure on Clemson to just be a top 12 team when the dust settles. And same thing for Penn State. You could argue there's a very short list of coaches who recruit better than James Franklin. The roster he currently has probably has 3 or 4 guys that are going to get drafted in the first round. Last year, all we heard is like, they got Josh Allen 2.0. And then you watched him play. You're like, yeah, this is like Josh Allen at Wyoming, not Josh Allen on the Bills. So they fire their offensive coordinator. They hire the dude from Kansas. Defensively, they are always loaded. And he's just a polarizing individual because he gets you 9 wins, can't beat Ohio State, can't beat Michigan, doesn't feel like they're really close in terms of the top dogs. They take care of basically everyone else they play. But I think there's tangible pressure on them to make the playoffs this year. And unlike Dabo, it's not like he has anything on his resume. Like, I've won natties. I've won natties. This guy hasn't won natties. Hasn't even won the Big Ten. I'm not saying he's got to win the Big Ten. He shouldn't. Ohio State's better. But if they can't get to 10-2 and be in the top 12, I think that's a failure for a program who there can't be 10 teams with better rosters in the NFL. I saw Hugh Freeze was interviewing with Marty Smith and McGee, Smith and McGee. And he's like, listen, it sucked losing that game to Alabama last year when Jalen Milroe on third, I think it was third and 29 or third and 31, hit that bomb in the back of the end zone. He's like, it was awful. It doesn't get any worse. On the bright side, though, we had a team who didn't even come close to having their talent, and we went toe to toe with them. And that's the thing with Penn State. Like, you're out talenting basically everyone probably on your schedule this year, except Ohio State. Like, you should be better than Michigan. They just lost 18 dudes in the NFL and Jim Harbaugh. So I'm fascinated to watch Penn State. I enjoy watching their defense play. Who doesn't? But their offense has been putrid for a while now. And it's on James Franklin, who is an offensive guy kind of at his core, at his heart. He was a former coach, wide receiver coach. And like clearly he can't fix that because recruiting is what he does and what he does best. And you got to question everything else. So I listen, my national championship pick right now, as we sit here, would probably be some combination of Georgia, Ohio State, Oregon. But I, things could get chaotic in the playoffs, right? You get 12 teams. I'm sure if not this, we're gonna have a crazy upset. I would say in the next 2 years. Does it happen this year? Who knows? Like Ole Miss is a good example. Everyone's picking them to make the playoffs. Let's say they don't. Let's say they go 9-3 and don't. He's won double-digit games the last 2 years. For the first time in program history, it is difficult to win there. He should not be winning more than LSU, more than I don't care that Saban's gone, DuBois in Alabama, more than Georgia. He shouldn't. So if somehow he doesn't make it and some other SEC team sneaks in, like I don't think it's the end of the world. But when you're paying Dabo $11.5 million, when all we ever hear is how great Penn State's roster is, you can't not make the playoffs and not have it and play in the the 3-and-out Sandal Bowl and think anyone's gonna care. Okay, last but not least, quick take Tuesday here. The reaction to Steph Curry, and it's like, oh, I can't believe it. It's like, guys, he's been doing this since Davidson. This has been going on now, these moments, since 2008 and 2007 and 2009, whatever the year that he took the Davidson on the run. That was his sophomore year. Remember, he came back for his junior year and the team wasn't as good. But we first really learned about him in the NCAA tournament. I mean, you're talking 16, 17 plus years ago. We saw that. And then for a decade straight, this guy's winning MVPs, lead teams to titles. Kevin Durant literally had to join him or he would have 0 championships. They've taken a lot of shit. But let's face it, as Bob Myers once told Kevin Durant, you need us, we don't need you. We will win more without you. Can't say you will win without us. Turned out to be true. Like, John, they needed Kevin Durant too. Obviously, he helped. But we saw 2 years ago, when Steph Curry led the Warriors to another title, he just had one of the greatest athletic careers. Because let's face it, I don't know if the Warriors are going to be good again in the rest of his career. I don't know if it matters. Because I think that was the cherry on top of one of the greatest careers I've ever seen. And I think with him, the best part about kind of his generation before, college played a part in your career because what he did in college kind of put him on the map. Goes back to like Magic Johnson and Larry Bird playing in the national championship in college. Michael Jordan hitting the game-winning shot in college. And Steph's college career, to me, is part of his resume. He took this little fucking team that, let's face it, most people would know nothing about and led him to the Elite Eight, knocking off Kansas. So Steph Curry, that moment, he hit 17 three-pointers in the semifinal game and the final game. He scored 60 points in the last 2 games. If he's a little off, they not only don't win gold, they might not even make it to the championship game. They needed all of his 36 points to beat Serbia, Jokic's team, which is one of the best games I've ever seen. I assumed they were going to kill France. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to go play golf with a couple buddies. And we put on, YouTube TV on our phone on like hole four. It's like, oh, they're up 10. I'm like, oh, they're going to end up blowing them out. And then the game kind of kept close, kept close. And by the time we got to the turn, it was really backed up. So we went to the bar at the turn and watched like the last 6 minutes. And I think that's what Steph Curry has done for the Warriors. It's what he did for Davidson. That is Steph Curry, who in this generation, there are really two guys in the sport. Obviously, the NBA just got a ton of money from the television networks, but they don't really rate relative to what they used to do. There are two guys, when you put them on TV, get huge ratings. And when they play each other, it does the highest rated game in the NBA, beside like the finals, which is down by half from like 6, 7 years ago when LeBron and Curry used to play. And it's those two guys. And LeBron, obviously, everyone's like, oh, he's great. He's great. We get it. He's one of the greatest athletes we've ever seen. He's still awesome. But like, he's played like that the whole tournament. Curry was down early. And if he did not play like he did, we don't win. We needed all of his 60 points. And the way he did it, the fashion in which he did it, making fun of the French crowd, it was vintage. And whether they ever make the playoffs again with the Warriors, because who knows? To me, that's a cherry on top of his career. And 20 million people watched the game on Saturday. I can imagine a ton of people watched the game on Thursday. Uh, it was fantastic to watch all those guys play. And it's pretty crazy that in a league, in a sport full of young star players, all I ever hear, NBA's never been better. There's more talent. The two best players, by a pretty wide margin, really the three of them, were all 35 years and older. And the two guys leading them down the stretch in the gold medal game was a 40-year-old and a 36, 37-year-old in LeBron and Steph. So it didn't get any better. And the best part about Steph, Tiger was always like this when he was playing well. It's like, this is just so entertaining. I can't move off. I don't want to watch anything. I can't imagine watching anything else. And a lot like Tiger, little different circumstances. The Masters in 2019, cherry on the top of his career. And that's what it felt like with Steph Curry when he hit those shots. He hit 4 3-pointers in the last couple minutes and just executed the French national team.